Hello and welcome to another edition of Community Forum. My name is Joseph Feaster. I am the host of the program. And as usual, I have some excellent guests who join me on this particular program. But today I have a really special guest, a friend I've known for many, many years as he climbed the political ladder and is now serving in the 114th Congress. He is Congressman Stephen Lynch, who I will have you come on camera in a moment, but I want to talk about him a little bit because he's a person who is persistent, he is a person who is a maverick, he is a person who is committed, he is dedicated, he is a leader. He has served in the U.S. Congress since 2001. Prior to that, he served as a state senator here in Massachusetts, as well as in the House of Representatives. He is a labor man, having been an iron worker during his career here in Massachusetts. But I am delighted to have him here. He has honored me on a number of occasions, not just by being a friend, but more importantly, coming here on Community Forum, spending some time to chat with us about the issues of the day. So, Congressman Lynch, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Joe. Good to be with you again, my friend.
Well, in terms of, like I said, I'm honored to have you here, and
please.
we usually have some great conversations because there's so much that you're involved with. And I have to give kudos to Elizabeth, who is your press secretary.
Elizabeth Zappola, yeah.
Zappola. Yeah. She gave me some extraordinary meat
a
for
Boston
discussion
Latin kid.
today. Well, in terms of that's a reason why.
Yeah.
In terms of she's definitely acquitting herself well and representing you well. But let's get right into it because you're the ranking member of the Financial Services Committee and, not of the Finance Security.
Yeah, National Security.
The National Security Committee. Yeah. And I want to focus on that because there's so many things that are going on in terms of national security. And I'm just going to take a peek at my notes here because there are so many things I don't want to miss any of the topical areas that were provided. But before I get there, I do want to talk about, because I want folks to get a recap, that in 2014, you and I had a similar sit down, and we talked about a number of issues during that time frame. We talked about the Security Clearance Reform Act, which you were one of the signers on not signers, but you were one of the co-sponsors of that particular legislation. We were talking about federal shutdown. That was the issue of the day when we spoke during that time. We had conversation internationally because, again, with your security clearance and with your serving on that particular committee, the National Security Committee, we talked about Israel, we talked about Iraq, we talked about things going on in Syria, and I believe in Israel, that was a time when we had the Gaza situation that was going on, the dispute between Gaza and Israel. We were talking about the Affordable Care Act, because it was really just coming into fruition in 2014. We talked about immigration and we talked about minimum wage. Locally, we talked about the possibly relocation of the post office, and we talked about what was going on with South Coast Rail. So we see the shift. 2 years can have a significant impact on what the issues of the days are, and hopefully we'll cover a lot of them. But I want to focus on the National Security Committee, which you're the ranking member on, and some of the issues. And most recently, there was a warning, if you will, security warning that was put out by the United States with regard to travel in Europe. And again, there's been some questions raised about the ability of the TSA to manage the flow and certain issues. Let me ask you about, on two issues. One would be the whole issue around the security lines with TSA. And the other is there anything that Congress can do to provide assistance to the TSA in carrying out their responsibilities?
Well, sure. Thank you. I think it's a timely topic because you have a lot of people over the summer traveling, and we've seen the long lines mostly in O'Hare, the major air hubs, so O'Hare Airport in Chicago, Hartsfield-Jackson in Atlanta, because so many airlines fly there and then fly somewhere else. So the airlines, have a special responsibility, I think. Logan hasn't been as bad as some of those major hub airlines, airports, but still I think we can do better. I just did a walkthrough there recently to review the baggage handling and baggage screening operation. That slows down the process as well. When people are trying to avoid baggage fees and they're taking everything they can possibly carry onto the plane with them, it just, you're required to be very thorough in checking that baggage out as well. Couple of just red flags though. We just did, as part of the Inspector General for the TSA, we just did a review where we have what they call red teams. So a red team is a member of the Inspector General's office, and they will actually strap a gun on their ankle or put a knife in a cast or a bandage on their arm and then try to get through. So it's a test.
Yes.
We're trying to test our TSA screeners. So we did this in probably 17 major airports in the United States. And the results of that were abysmal. We had a failure rate, a failure to detect the weapons in about 90% of the cases.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. 85 to 90%.
Wow.
So
that's frightening.
That security, the head of security at that time left shortly after we came up with that analysis. There's a new Inspector General on board. There's a new Director of TSA, Peter Neffinger, who is a former admiral with the Coast Guard. And so he has taken and put in a whole new format for screening. And so we're in the process now. He's been in there probably 9 months, maybe closer to a year. And now we're going to go back out again and we're going to test again and see how many of these red teams are getting through and what our failure and success rate will be. But he's also taken steps to professionalize the TSA so that we have an academy that we put people through. We need to raise the wages. The wages for an incoming TSA Transportation Security Officer is between $28,000 and $35,000 a year. That is not enough to get a professional in there with a career path, that type of motivation, and to take the job seriously. We have a huge turnover. Congress, to show you how fouled up things are, Congress put forward extra money because of these long lines.
Yes.
We put extra money in to hire, I think it was 700 new TSA screening officers. In the time that it took Congress to pass the bill and pay for the new 770, I think, new screeners, 4,000 had left. 4,000 had quit in the time that it took us to hire 700. So obviously we're deeper in the ditch than we were when we started out. So we've really got to take a new look at that and try to make it a professional organization that pays its workers so they're not quitting left and right. As the economy has improved a little bit, you've seen people saying, well, I don't want to stay in this job anymore. I'm going to go do something else.
Sure.
And that's been a problem. So yeah, I think Congress can do a lot. I think the TSA was put together in the aftermath of the attacks on September 11th. We did not give full rights to those employees under Title V like every other federal employee.
Sure.
And so they don't have rights. They have whatever rights management gives them. So morale is low. Morale is low in that field. We have some wonderful people, but they get beat down after a while. They feel like they have no representation and no voice. So the American Federation of Government Employees tries to go in there and represent them in any way they can, but because statutorily they don't have those rights, it's very difficult for that union to do a good job in representing those employees. So we have to step up our game here. We have to treat our transportation security employees better. We need to pay them better. We have to make a professional force out of them where someone could make a career out of that, doing that for a living.
It's so much, this question typifies what we don't get in the general public. I mean, you touched upon about 10 different areas of concern or necessity in order to really protect us as we're going
This
forward.
is serious,
Yes.
because if we have a breach, if we have somebody getting onto a commercial airliner with a bomb, that's a major, that'll have major ramifications for our country's national security.
But it also speaks to the comments you speak, also speak to the labor side of it, from the standpoint of the concern and compassion for the employees, because what you've just pointed out, not having the Title V protections, not having that, any employer wants to, the turnover is disastrous in any type of business.
Yeah.
So you're losing, as you pointed out, 4,000 out, 700 in,
Yeah.
you're losing. So it sounds like a number of issues, but my point is the public doesn't hear this enough to know what are all the components of the issues, and they only hear the bad things, of something bad happening, long lines, something gets past them.
Yeah.
But it goes more deeper than that.
Yeah, and just one last statistic. So while the number of screeners has dropped by 10% because of all these people leaving, the number of passengers has increased by 15%. So
Yes.
there are more people out there, and that's great. It's great for the economy to have them flying, but obviously those two trends are moving in different directions, and that's not good. So we've got to buckle down and straighten that problem out.
Well, good. I'm glad you're there, and on top of it, not only in your committee functions, but knowing you as I do, in terms of staying on top of that, Congressman. So I definitely appreciate that. But just to shift a bit from our air to our rails, I mean, because again, rail travel is just as important, both here and abroad. My wife and I were in Italy last year, and we traveled by rail throughout the country. And again, and we had the situation where I think it was at Amsterdam, where they had to intervene, and on some passengers intervened, or happened to be in the military, but had to intervene, et cetera. And I know that you recently had a summit here where you looked at the security of our rail system. Can you shed a little bit about that?
Sure. People don't realize it, but 5 times as many people travel in this country by rail as travel by air. But because of the events of September 11th, the use of commercial airliners as weapons, a lot of, well, I would say 90% of our security, actually 95% of our security money goes towards the air side and not towards rail. So yeah, you're right. We saw that attempt by ISIL to take over a train in Amsterdam. We had some very brave American citizens who intervened in that case. But also, if you look at the Brussels attack and the Paris attack, those also had rail components where in Paris and those attacks, in Brussels and the attacks, they actually there was an attack on the rail system as well.
That is correct.
So we see that the Islamic State is using terror on rapid transit as a way of carrying out their attacks. So we had all of the experts come into Boston at South Station, and we're trying to use best practices that we're seeing being used in India, where they had huge attacks there on their rail system several years ago. Spain was attacked. In Madrid, they had people leave backpacks with bombs in them and then detonated them through cell phones. We've seen attacks in Moscow, in London, in the subways. So it's a trend that we're seeing in Europe and in parts of Asia. And we want to be prepared in a way that prevents that from happening here in the United States. Also, we had one attempt from Canada, I think it was from Montreal going into New York, where someone tried to use one of those trains as a way of conducting a terrorist attack. So we're trying to redirect some of our resources. It's difficult because these train stations have hundreds of different entrances and exits. So it's a much different situation. But in our major hubs, like in South Station or Union Station in Washington, D.C., we have increased within the stations security measures, such as when Mike Mulhern was there, we got him a couple $1 million for surveillance of the platforms so that we know what's going on. We can identify people, which was very helpful in the London bombings after the fact of identifying the people who actually did the attack. So we're trying some of those measures as well.
Well, and again, being a New Yorker in terms of Penn Station is, just a major hub as well. And so when you talk about Penn Station, when you talk about here in South Station, Union Station, that's just that East Coast link is so important. And also the disruptions that could take place, not only in terms of passenger trains, but in terms of our freight systems as well.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So I'm happy that you have brought that summit together for us to focus on that, because you tighten, it's almost like a water balloon. You tighten up one area and it pops out on the other side. So
that's right. Yeah.
That's it. I want to stay with the travel piece, because again, folks are sitting out there, the summertime is coming, talking about planning. Is there any advice that you might want to share to U.S. citizens who are traveling abroad? What are the types of safety measures that they might want to do in advance? I recently had a person from, I believe it was, she may have been in with the CIA. We had a group from the Breakfast Group, and we had the CIA, the FBI, State Police, and the Boston Police, and she passed about something. I left at home, so I don't have it with me. But she gave some advice of some things you might be able to do, checking in with the embassy and doing different things. Are there any additional things that you might suggest to folks?
Well, sure. I'm in the Middle East quite a bit, so we've done. I've flown into Iraq about 18 times now. Pakistan, probably a half dozen. Afghanistan, a dozen. But when we're traveling, I usually travel with a couple of military attachés. So. There as a security escort, and they're very sharp on this. A couple of things that they've advised me to do. Number one, you try to streamline your travel, which is, if you can get pre-check access or similar streamlining where you can go through a checkpoint without, as a frequent flyer, that type of thing. If the airline knows who you are and has a profile, there's usually enhanced clearance that you have to obtain to get that pre-check clearance. But there's also work that we do with passengers who travel a lot, and we get them clearance so that they are pre-cleared, and the clearance doesn't have to take place at the airport. That's one thing. Number two, and it's really, it's sort of my bugaboo, so forgive me. So I'm the ranking Democrat on national security, and so we do action reviews on every single, not every single, but almost every single bombing that happens anywhere in the world where it affects U.S. national security or an ally's national security. So whether that's Israel or something that takes place in Iraq or Afghanistan, where our troops are present. Even places like I mentioned before, India, Madrid, London, we review those bombings and those attacks. And one thing I would just say to a general traveler, I would say the idea is to look, the incidence of attacks at checkpoints. Mm-hmm. If you Google, attack or bombing and checkpoint, you'll get tens of thousands of reports from all these bombings that occur at checkpoints. That's because that screening process is working. In other words, someone's coming in to do harm, and that screening checkpoint, once they're discovered, that becomes, the battleground right there at that checkpoint. So you, as a traveler, especially with your family, and when I travel with my security team, you need to get through and away from that checkpoint. Do not stand there. Now, the typical thing is, you get your shoes off, the belt off, mm-hmm. Your bag, and everything's all over the place, and you kind of, after you get through the checkpoint, you stay right there. Sometimes they even put a table there for you. Right. And you get yourself together, and it takes you another 10 minutes, and then you go on your way. You need to get away from that checkpoint, because if there's a nefarious person there that's looking to bomb and they're going to get screened, it's going to happen right there at ground zero at that checkpoint. So you need to get through and away. My people are always saying to me, okay, scoop up your stuff and then walk as far as you can away from that checkpoint, because you don't know in the next 5 or 10 minutes that somebody else will be coming through there, and then that checkpoint becomes a violent place and a place where you don't want to be. So we are catching more. The checkpoints are becoming more thorough. We're actually getting people. We're stopping people. But in some cases, they're also detonating, and that's not good. You need to be away from that checkpoint as fast as possible. So not to beat that any further, but that's probably the prime concern or the prime advice I would have to for people that are traveling: get through the checkpoint, get past the checkpoint.
You know, and you brought it to me because I'm one of those. I don't stay. I usually gather my stuff up and move over to a not as distant as you're talking about. But that's a very good point that you raised. And now I harken back to what transpired in Brussels was the ones with the carts coming through.
Right.
Very, very similar. They didn't even they got it, at the counters. In fact, so you're talking about that because they know if they go through detection, they're more likely than not to be caught.
And in Paris at the soccer game,
right?
So the French president was there, and at the game they were trying to get in and detonate. It was France was playing Germany in the game, and they were screened. They were detected at the checkpoint going into the stadium.
Yes,
there was a checkpoint there, and they detonated right there. So another example of where just getting through the checkpoint would help.
And thank you for that. I mean, these are the types of things, and maybe I just would encourage the viewing audience that they ought to go online, because I'm sure there's online these types of suggestions as to what travelers might do as they go abroad. Let me just shift a little bit and maybe say go up a few more thousand feet, because we've been focusing on the ground on these particular issues. And let's talk about it policy-wise. Are we doing enough as far as a country with regard to ISIS or ISIL or however one wants to describe them? Do you feel we're doing enough, Congressman?
I think we could do more, but I think it's tricky. We just came back from Iraq several weeks ago. I had a chance to go out to Anbar province and meet with some Sunni sheikhs. I've spent a lot of time in the refugee camps on the Syrian-Turkish border, on the Syrian-Lebanon border near Beirut, the Syrian-Jordanian border. And the one thing I would caution us about in terms of going into Syria is that there are a whole lot of people in that area that would just love the United States to come in and fight their war for them. And I don't think that would be good. I don't think, here's the problem with Syria. If we went in there, and we do have the military capability, we would suffer a lot of casualties, however, if we went into Syria and tried to remove ISIL or remove Bashar al-Assad and that regime. The question that remains, and this is the question that presented itself in Iraq, is once we've achieved a military victory, what happens next? And I can see no group, and I've gone and met with at least a half a dozen rebel groups, so-called Free Syrian Army moderate rebels. They are not moderate, not the ones I've met with, and we tried to vet some of them and came up with very small numbers that were acceptable. But the challenge for us is what's going to happen after that military conflict if we're going to engage in that. And the problem is that there's nothing there. There's no responsible party with the capability to take over that government. So I think and we're in the midst of a military conflict right now. They're trying to take Fallujah back.
Yes.
It's a coalition there, mostly Shia, quite frankly. But also we're planning, we're working with Kurdish and Iraqi troops in the area around Mosul. We're taking some of the surrounding towns, and so that's going to be a big conflict. But we're going to need a coalition, an international coalition. Maybe at some point, after we drive out ISIL and beat them militarily, there's going to have to be some type of caretaker government that goes in there so that we don't make the same mistakes that we made in Iraq. In Iraq, we left. We really had no choice. Nur al-Maliki, who was the prime minister, said, we're not going to sign a status of forces agreement that allows you to stay here. Right. You're going to have to get out. So we got out. He immediately disenfranchised all the Sunni population in western Iraq and in Anbar province, and as a result, the flare-up between Sunni and Shia resumed after we left. That was their part, their fault. we did as much as we can. But so we trained 938,000 Iraqis militarily, police, border guards, and army. But still, the lack of cohesion with that country allowed ISIL, a rather smaller group, 20,000 fighters in all, to take up almost a third of the country and also a huge part of Syria. So we can't go do that again. Many of them would like us to. These Sunni sheikhs that I met with a few weeks ago, wanted us to come back in big, 165,000 troops. And I explained to them, I said, General Petraeus is not walking through that door anytime soon. Yeah. We have done that. Right. We have lost 4,000 good Americans. We spent close to $1 trillion trying to do that, training Iraqis and trying to help form this government. But as soon as we left, they went back to this tribal sectarian violence, yes. And it tore the country apart. So the policy must be one of engagement, but also of holding accountable the countries in the region. If Saudi Arabia is feeding the Wahhabi adherents in that area, if Turkey is allowing fighters to go across the border to feed ISIL, those countries are major players. Iran, if they're adding to the kinetic activity there, those countries are going to have to be part of the solution, and they're going to have to be held accountable as well. So I don't think U.S. only, going in there militarily at great risk to our own sons and daughters, that's the solution. I think we really need a collaborative effort. And I think now that London realizes it, Paris realizes it, Brussels realizes it, a lot of the countries in that area realize that. I think there might be a greater willingness to engage in a meaningful way, because this whole refugee diaspora that we're seeing is because of the war that's going on there. They say 11 million people displaced out of Syria because of the actions of this Islamic State. So we're all seeing, Germany's seeing a huge influx. They've got almost 1 million refugees in Germany alone out of Syria. So they're seeing the impact of this immediately in a direct way. So I think there's a greater willingness now to engage and try to figure out a solution than there was before.
I would like to discuss the refugee aspects, but that's almost a separate program that you and I could have, because of the implications worldwide on what to do, how to do it. Could be, so I'm going to put that in my pocket for another day for us, because we could spend a whole program on that for sure. But one of the things that you pointed out, and you serve on the Financial Services Committee, and you're on the task force, and what has been reported and we're well aware of, and I think you were alluding to that when you were talking about what some of the countries in the Middle East are doing, because not only are there people going, and as well as even from here, from the United States, but we're talking about the financial implications, the monies that's flowing back and forth in support of what ISIS or ISIL are doing. Yeah. I know you serve on the task force under the Financial Services Committee. Can you talk a little bit about what's being done in that regard? Because you got to cut off that pipeline of terms of the dollars that are going there to support this effort.
Sure. So we have a task force on terrorist financing that I'm the ranking Democrat, I'm the top Democrat on, and Mike Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania is the chairman, full committee chairman. So the task force chairman. So the idea is to get other countries, especially in the Middle East, to adopt anti-money laundering legislation that requires the banks to block the flow of assets to terrorist or criminal organizations. And so while the United States and most of the Western Europe is very much up on this, there are many countries in the Middle East and Africa and in Asia that have, the Philippines being a perfect example, that have gaps that allow these terrorist organizations to use the legitimate banking system as a way of funding terrorist activity. So what we do, and Jordan was a perfect example, they had a very loose and very permissive financial and anti-money laundering protocol in there. So we went in, sat with the members of the parliament there in Jordan, their assembly, met with King Abdullah. They held it, we explained the problems there and explained to them that U.S. banks did not want to invest or do business in Jordan because of the risk of inadvertently financing terrorism, and that it was hurting their country and their business. Mm-hmm. They understood. And within 6 months, King Abdullah called an extraordinary session of their legislature, and they adopted the proper anti-money laundering statutes as a result of our conversations. I sat several times with their the leader of their central bank. They adopted an FIU, a financial intelligence unit that monitors suspicious activity in Jordan. And so, they've got a robust, this was probably 6 or 7 years ago we did this, probably longer now, but now they've got a very robust banking system there. And I have to say that even the tellers, the tellers at the bank, and the Jordanian people, once they understood that the whole reason for doing this was to keep the terrorists out of the banking system, they were 100% for it. So that's what we've tried to do. We went to Morocco and did the same thing there. So we're trying to identify those areas that are most problematic. We've still got some problems in the Gulf states, not from the government, but because of wealthy individuals that support certain groups like Hezbollah, like Al-Qaeda, in some cases like the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, different groups, Abu Sayyaf in the Philippines, Boko Haram in northeastern Nigeria, Al-Shabaab in Somalia. So although we've really squeezed them off, so much so now that it's difficult to get civilian money in for the civilian population. That's how badly banks have just pulled out of Somalia because they're so lawless. Mm-hmm. Now we have a problem about remittances. How do we get money to the good people of Somalia, because the banks have all left because they don't want to be supporting Al-Shabaab. So we're doing a lot of that. We need to do more. And the other part of this that is a gaping loophole is beneficial ownership. A lot of the United States allows, some of our states, Delaware, Wyoming, and some others, have very permissive beneficial ownership rules so that you can have a shell corporation and funnel money that way. So it's one of those loopholes that we're going to have to close off, and it begins here at home. It begins within our own states.
Well, that's a good segue. We're going to take a break because I definitely appreciate our discussions about national security. But, as your predecessor once said, all politics is local.
Oh, yeah.
And so therefore, we're going to come back and talk about some things that are closer to home, some things you're doing right here for your constituents here in Massachusetts. And not to say that what we just talked about is not servicing them as well, but we want to bring it a little bit more home. Sure. And of course, sitting here in Stoughton, I want to see what we're talking about for the good citizens of the town of Stoughton. So we'll be back in a moment, Congressman. So folks, stay tuned.
Hi, it's Gary LaPierre, and the crew wants to thank Maxie's Delicatessen. That's at 117 Sharon Street in Stoughton. They're 781-341-1662. American Cancer Society, yes, they're looking for volunteers. Drive cancer patients to and from their treatments. 1-800-ACS-6662, or just go to www.cancer.org. Ilsa Mark's Food Pantry in St. Anthony's Free Market, 2 Park Avenue in Stoughton. For more information, call Christine Gallagher. That's at 781-341-0611 or 781-341-0549. Meals on Wheels. Just ask for Jessica. You'll find her at 781-344-8882, extension 2. Stoughton Penny Saver. Our business is advertising your business, they tell us. 27 Rose Glen Street, Stoughton, 781-344-4833. Community Forum showtimes in Stoughton. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 6 p.m., Monday at 8 p.m., Tuesday at 5 p.m. It's on Comcast Channel 9 and Verizon Channel 28. All comments and suggestions welcome. Contact us at communityforum1@yahoo.com. Community Forum showtimes in Easton. Mondays at 9 p.m., Tuesday at 8 a.m., Wednesdays 3 p.m., Saturday 10 a.m. And that too, Comcast Channel 9, Verizon Channel 22. Samaritans, they're at 41 West Street on the 4th floor in Boston, 02111. Their phone number is 617-536-2460. 24-hour helplines for Samaritans, and the number is 877-870-HOPE. That's 877-870-4673. Samaritans, you can find them at 800-252-TEEN. That's 252-8336. Or find them online at SamaritansHope.org.
Monday night bingo at the Avatar congregation located at 1179 Central Street in Stoughton. For those who like bingo, the doors open at 4:30. The game starts at 6:30. So this is a time for you to go out, have fun, and support the congregation at Avatar. Our guest today, Congressman Stephen Lynch. This is information on his offices in Boston, Brockton, Quincy, and D.C. You can contact him as well by, and also check out his web pages at www.lynch.house.gov. He's also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So take note of this information. His Boston, Brockton, Quincy, and D.C. offices by Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So our congressman is certainly accessible. This is the ways that you can reach him. Well, Congressman, we're back. As I said, we want to come down. We want to now come down from our perch on talking about some of the global issues, even though they do have impact on us as your constituents here in Massachusetts and in your district here. But I want to talk about some of the things. Oftentimes, young people want to go to the academies. And, and first and foremost, what I've learned in more recent years that the recommendations by your congressman are one of the ways in which you can do that. Can you talk about the process? And I also know there were some people that you have already, and I think you mentioned this at our recent town meeting as well. You mentioned it. So you may want to talk about those individuals who have gone through the academy or are in the academy now as a result of your efforts.
Sure. So as a member of Congress, I get to appoint at least 4 per year to the Naval Academy, to the Academy at West Point, to the Air Force Academy. Also, we appoint to Mass Maritime and also U.S. Merchant Marine. So the way we usually handle it is the best way to do this, if you're a sophomore in high school, that's probably when you should start thinking about this, if this might something you want to do, is we have an Academy Day. We hold it at East Middle School in Braintree in October. And we bring all the academies in. So we'll have people, and some of our past graduates. So sometimes the Naval Academy at Annapolis will let one of the midshipmen come home after first year from our area. And so they'll be able to ask questions of that individual and what was first year like and how are you enjoying it, what are the challenges, that type of thing. But we bring them from all the academies as well as the Coast Guard Academy as well. So we've had great success. Even though I'm given 4 spots to fill, this year we'll send 8 because of the high caliber of the young people in our district. So, and we've had some great success in Stoughton. Some of our recent Academy attendees, I just want to point out Jeff Johnson of 18 Erica Drive. His parents are Ken and Sherry Ann. He's a Stoughton High School graduate and also attended Norwich for a little bit. And that's a very common practice. It's good prep, but he just graduated from West Point, and class of 2015, but as often happens, because of whatever area they like to choose while they're in West Point, and it goes based on how you finish in your class.
Okay.
The top finishers get their first pick, and Jeff Johnson did so well. He chose flight school, so he's in flight school right now in Pensacola, Florida. Okay. Yeah, so I'm enormously proud of him. And Michaela Sakich, she's a 72 Bassick Circle. Her parents are Linda McNally and Darrell Sakich. She's a Cardinal Spellman graduate, and she is currently right now at the Naval Academy at Annapolis, and she will be part of the class of 2017. And I keep tabs on my kids, so from what I understand, she's doing really, really well. So and it's just a wonderful. First of all, it's a blessing to our country to have young people that wish to serve, but also it's it's an incredible experience for these young people to join the academy, and then obviously after graduation, serving their military component, which can often it's a wide spectrum. It's usually up to the young person which area they'd like to go into. Some of them have been highly technical. I'm always amazed at the number of our people that go to Annapolis and choose infantry, or Marine Corps. They want to be grunts, or it's just it's a wide spectrum. Although you have Jeff Johnson, who's at flight school, so he's chosen that. So it's really it's a broad spectrum. I think that's why I say our Academy Day is very good to sort of get the juices flowing and let you know what's out there, and let you talk to some of the young people who are in the academies right now, and oftentimes we'll have representatives as well, more senior people there, able to ask questions and tell people how to prepare if they really see this as something they'd like to do. And the nice thing about that is we invite the whole families in. So we're not talking to a captive audience. This is a young person with their mom and dad. Okay. Sometimes the grandparents will come, and we fill the auditorium. We take our time and explain everything. And
is it done locally, Congressman, or is that done in Washington?
No, we do this. Bob Folks, who is my chief of staff here, my district director here in Massachusetts, he runs that program, and he's been out to multiple times to West Point and Annapolis and the Air Force Academy at Colorado Springs, Colorado. So he has a wonderful relationship with the commandant and the people who run the academies. And so we have an ongoing dialogue that helps us track our kids and see how they're doing, and just guide them, I guess.
Just one question, just on process. Person sitting there watching this program, sophomore, interested. Do they contact your office? Call your office, and they get the application there?
Well, they can actually come in and sit down and talk with us about what their plans might be. Some of them are totally focused. I have young people that come into my office and say, look, my grandfather was at West Point, my dad was at West Point, and I'm going to West Point, And then you have others, some young women who might come in and say, I'm the first in my family that will be doing this, and I have no idea what I'm going to be confronting, and could you help me with this? I'm not even sure which branch of the service I might like to serve in, or which school I might like to attend. Can you give me sort of a flavor of what is out there? So we get all sorts of things. So the best thing to do is to have the young person come in and sit with Bob or myself if I'm there, and just explain what the opportunities are, and then help them with the beginning of the process. And there are all kinds of things that the academies look for. They love the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts. Eagle Scouts, or Civil Air Patrol. They love kids that are sort of focused on that. They love kids that are involved in extracurricular activities, volunteering, just working with seniors or playing sports, that type of thing, being a leader, donating your time for charity. They like to see that whole person. So we can sometimes guide young people to certain activities that are going to give them a higher ranking on the academy list.
Well, I was a Sea Cadet.
Oh, well, there you go. They love that.
Yeah.
They love the Sea Cadet. So it sort of gives the Academy a sense of where that young person's head is at. And, public service and volunteer service is very much in line with what they're looking for.
I'm sure that there are some people watching the program who don't even know that the congressman's office is approachable. Something like that. As you said, come in, chat with me, chat with Bob, chat with Nick, chat with with Danny. All of these. One probably sitting there saying, "Oh, I can't go down. I didn't know I could go down and speak in my congressman's office." Let's shift to another area where your office is, beside the many other ways in which you're helpful. Let's talk about just persons who want to come into D.C. I've been down to visit you in your office in D.C., lobbying for different issues at times. I've been on the Capitol tour, but times have changed. The days when you could just go in and go in the gallery and walk around it has ended. Yeah. Now the process is it has to go through the Congressional office. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So we control the Capitol, so that's a pretty easy task for our staff. But obviously, if you're coming down with a big group, we'd like you to contact either the Boston or the Quincy or the Brockton office. And I know the numbers were posted a little earlier. And let us know when you're coming. And then we'll arrange for you to come to our office, and we'll make sure you get a guided tour of the Capitol. They've opened a new Capitol Center there, beautiful. President Obama cut the ribbon, I think, in 2010, but it's really interactive now. It's much better than it used to be. We used to just walk people around and show them stuff, but now it's, they've got the headphones and explains it in a much greater detail, much richer experience about the history of the Capitol. And then if people would like to go to the White House, there's obviously a more detailed security clearance process that we have to go through. So we would appreciate maybe 60 or 90 days in advance if we could get all the information on people, because you've got people jumping the fence at the White House. You got people landing drones on the lawn there. So they're really hypersensitive, as they need to be, about security within the White House. And but we're pretty successful in terms of getting people access to the White House. Depending on the schedule there. Sometimes in the past, the White House has just shut down all tours because of activity going on at the White House. We can't help that, and we have to respect the President's discretion on that. But for the most part, they know people want to get to the White House, and we like to facilitate that. So if people are going to be down there for certain, especially busy times of the year, let us know far in advance as you can, and we'll try to make your experience as rewarding and as thorough and as welcoming as possible. But that's our responsibility. That Capitol is the people's house, and we want, we got good recommendations on restaurants and all that stuff. So we'll steer you in the right direction.
Well, I just want to stay on this just by not an inquiry, but just by my own observations, having visited your office down there. But there are people don't. Again, I just want to point out to the viewing audience, our Congressional office, they are there to represent. They do represent us, and they're there to assist us.
Oh yeah.
I want you to use those phone numbers.
Yeah.
That's why the Congressman has the staff that he has, and
we got a great, just local staff like Shana Barnes, who runs my office in Brockton.
Yes.
Araba Ajay Korantang, who's my contact person in the Boston office. Bruce Fernandez down in D.C., great young guy. Mariana Osorio, she's down there as well. Kevin Ryan, longtime aide. As I mentioned, Bob Folks in the Boston office. We've got a wonderful, wonderful group. And Joe King in my Quincy office, he's there right behind the Teed station. So we try to push out into the communities so that nobody's got to take the ride all the way into Boston. They can go to Quincy or Brockton as well. And we just try to, we try to make sure that people understand that they can use us. Passports, stuff like that.
Well,
people don't realize to go to Canada now you need a passport. I remember we just jump on a bus and go.
Right.
But now you gotta get a passport. You gotta work that out. If you got travel, we get more calls from young couples who are, it's Thursday. They're getting married Saturday, and Monday they're leaving for
Right.
Italy, no passport.
Right.
So we do this scramble routine. Don't do that, but we do have a
not
scramble.
encouraged.
We have code red. So we have to walk them into the immigration office and get their passports and get them on that plane so they can go on their honeymoon. So that is very common. Usually the guy doesn't have the passport. The bride has her passport and all her stuff squared away. It's the guy that doesn't know what's going on.
Well, those of us who are married, we know who's in charge there, Congressman. We know who takes the lead on that, so that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. It's always the guy.
Yeah, but I just want to even point out things such as, I've gotten people, letters from the president, thank you, greetings, birthday greetings. All of these things are done through your office, and people, I just want to say to folks, you have a question, call your congressional office. There are the things that they service, constituent service-wise, that they can do.
If
We've
you're
gotten
turning
flags
100,
and
like
everything else.
there's
That's
so many
right.
people now that turn 100, God bless them. But if your mom is turning 100, you need to get a letter and a birthday card from the president. That's a huge accomplishment. So we can sort of facilitate that, and that's a.
And I had that for a dear friend. I call it my 100. She'll be 103 on December 1st.
Wow.
That's what we did.
We see a lot of that now.
We did.
It was
that
a rarity
on
when
her
I was
100th
first in politics, but now a lot of people are passing that mark.
Well, I'm going to talk about a constituent issue which has some sadness to it, but it also has, it again demonstrates how committed you are and your office is and on the issue. And that's I want to go back to Glenn Doherty.
Oh, sure.
For his family. It was a situation where he was killed in that consular attack in Benghazi, and they were looking for the death benefits and things were being delayed. You interceded in that particular effort and was able to accomplish that for them. I know I'm pointing it out, folks, because it's constituent services to demonstrate once again what the congressman and his office can do. I know it's a sad issue, but again, it had a positive outcome. Can you chat about that a little bit, Congressman?
So as you mentioned, Glenn Doherty was a Navy SEAL. He served multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then went to work for the CIA as a security contractor. He was killed on the roof of the CIA station in Benghazi on the night of September 11th, 2012. And he was killed with 3 other Americans on the compound, but he alone was denied his death benefit to his family. And the reason given was that the policy that the government encouraged him to take out did not cover his mom or his family. It just covered his spouse or his children, and he was single. But under this policy, and here's the key part of this, they gave him a policy. He paid for it out of it. They took money out of his check every week, about $7,000 in premiums, because he has served in Iraq and Afghanistan prior to that on behalf of the CIA. So they had taken his premiums, but then when it came to pay out the benefits after he had been killed, they refused to do so. And it was language in the Defense Base Act of 1939. Might have been 41. So they hadn't changed it since then. And anyway, so I intervened. I drafted legislation and banged on a lot of doors in Congress and got people to pay attention. Everybody was talking about Benghazi, and I was trying to tell them, well, here's someone who hasn't received their full benefits and who passed away, who was killed in action in that conflict. So slowly we got some Republicans on board. Jason Chaffetz, a Republican from Utah. We sort of just told the story, the narrative of Glenn and his mom Barbara and his sister Kate Quigley. And so eventually the CIA, the pressure on the CIA, several weeks ago, they said, okay, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to change our policy, and we're going to cover not only Glenn Doherty, but anybody else, any other family who find themselves in a similar situation as Glenn Doherty. We're going to pay their death benefit to them. So it was a good change. I think there are not a lot of families, but there are a few families that will recover because of that. But it was the right thing to do. on behalf of Glenn Doherty in his memory, and it was his wish. It was his wish. He had paid the $7,000 in premiums, and he wanted his family to benefit from this. And so, you know, we were able to, with constant pressure, and we were certainly in the right.
Sure.
And it wasn't a partisan issue. The Republicans were pushing just as hard as we were to get this straightened out. But you know, there were 4 or 5 committees of jurisdiction that had to sign off on this. So there was, you know, out of the 5 committees, there was a Democrat and a Republican that had to sign off on this, and there was a lot of that knocking on doors, and it worked out in the end. And also, Amy Cannavale, who was a local attorney, you know, donated a lot of time in free legal. She was sort of my attorney on this, you know, my legal compatriot, who also did that, and she did a wonderful, wonderful job on that, and did it for free, just because it was the right thing to do.
Well, Congressman, as always, we're coming to the end of the hour, and as I said at the top of the program, the Congressman, that you are persistent, you are a leader, you are dedicated, and that's just a clear
K&L
example.
Gates is the name of the firm she works for. Yes. So Kate Quigley. I'm sorry, Amy Cannavale. So I just wanted to get her name in there because she did great work, and I got to give credit.
Well, we give Amy. You got your plug from the Congressman, and you know, and in terms of, even though I'm an attorney, I'm glad that you got the plug. But in terms of, again, Congressman, you always do it. And the things we didn't get a chance to talk about, your POW, MIA, Remembrance Act, about what you're doing around opiates, because I know both in your district here in Massachusetts, we're seeing into that. We're not going to be able to chat about that much. And, you know, we didn't get a chance to talk about the election. These are all things that we're going to have to come back and chat about.
Lou Kafka and Bill Gavin are doing great work on the opioid stuff on behalf of the people of Stoughton, just so you know.
Yes, and there's so much that's going on. So, you know, again, as always, we have such a fair exchange here, a great exchange. You do so much for us, and that's why I appreciate it. It makes my job easy, because the only thing I have to do is to have folks who will gather up the information and present it to me, all the great things you have done, and I have to try and parse through them and see what I can pull out to do. And we have so much more we could talk. We could talk for another half hour, but Roy wouldn't let me have that. So my time is really running out now, and I'm going to have to say thank you so much for joining me once again.
Thank you, Joe.
It's always a pleasure to have you on the program, and we may not have to wait 2 years. We may have to do this again next year.
Do it again soon. All right. Thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me.